Ladies and gentlemen, everyone wants to be their best self. But most people are waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect job, the perfect partner, or the perfect time. And in the waiting, they miss the becoming. Becoming your best self is not a destination, it's a commitment, a series of deliberate steps you take every day. It doesn't require perfection, it requires intention. So today I want to offer 5 steps, actually 6, that will help you start the journey. These steps are not magic. They won't change your life overnight. But if you commit to them, they will quietly transform who you are becoming. Becoming your best self doesn't start with a plan. It doesn't begin with motivation or vision boards or perfect morning routines. It begins with something far less glamorous, something most people avoid their entire lives. It begins with brutal honesty, the kind of honesty that keeps you up at night, not the surface level reflection you do when someone asks how your day was, not the kind that puts a positive spin on failure. This is the type of honesty that strips away the layers you've built to protect your ego, the masks, the excuses, the rehearsed lines you've been telling yourself. It's the moment you look in the mirror and stop justifying why things haven't changed. The moment you stop blaming traffic, your upbringing, your boss, or the economy. The moment you ask yourself a single searing question: am I proud of how I showed up today? That question doesn't demand perfection, it demands presence. It demands ownership. We live in a world that's master distraction. You can spend your entire life scrolling past your reflection, numbing the discomfort, curating a version of yourself you hope others will applaud. But you'll never grow from what you refuse to admit. You can't transform a story if you won't even read the first chapter honestly. I remember a young executive back in 2017. Brilliant guy, top of his class, charismatic, driven, full of potential. But he carried himself with a kind of sharpness, like he had something to prove. His intelligence wasn't the problem, his attitude was. He had a way of making people feel small, like every conversation was a competition. Eventually it caught up with him. He was let go, not because he couldn't do the job, but because no one wanted to follow him. He spent months blaming the leadership team, said they didn't understand him, claimed the company was political, said they were intimidated by his ambition, but none of that was true. The real issue wasn't out there, it was in the mirror. And here's the part that matters. One day, alone in his apartment, no job, no applause, no title, just silence, he broke. Not in the way people fall apart, but in the way people finally crack open. He wrote a letter to his former team, not out of obligation, not because it would earn him something back, but because he had finally taken off the mask. He apologized, he acknowledged his behavior, he owned his role in the story. That letter didn't fix everything overnight, but it shifted something deep inside him. Fast forward, that same man now leads a growing startup. He's built a culture where feedback is safe, where vulnerability is strength, where leadership isn't about knowing everything, but about growing through everything. His team would walk through fire for him, not because he's perfect, but because he's honest. He shows up, he owns his flaws. And that, more than any title, is what earns respect. The truth is, every breakthrough starts with a breakdown of illusion. And most of us walk around carrying truths we're too scared to speak. We wear a smile when we feel empty. We say, I'm fine, when we're falling apart. We blame others because it's easier than facing ourselves. But you cannot become your best self while dragging around the weight of denial. Self-awareness isn't a one-time act. It's a daily decision. It's waking up and asking, what part of today do I need to take responsibility for? It's recognizing when your tone hurts someone. It's noticing when your fear is dressed up as control. It's catching yourself in the act of playing small and choosing in that moment to step forward anyway. One of the most courageous things a person can do is confront their reflection and say, you know what, I messed up and I'm ready to do better. Not because someone forced them, not because they were caught, but because something inside them wants to rise. The world tells you to move fast, to always look forward, to chase the next goal. But sometimes the most powerful direction is inward, slowing down enough to notice the patterns that keep playing out in your life. The habits that sabotage your growth, the stories you've been telling yourself about what you're capable of or not capable of. That kind of honesty isn't loud, it's not glamorous, but it's the first step toward real change. You see, the best version of you isn't found in some distant future. It's hidden underneath the version of you that's been performing, pretending, proving. The best version of you shows up the moment you stop needing to impress and start needing to improve. And here's the beautiful thing. Once you start telling the truth to yourself, you give others permission to do the same. You become the kind of person who leads not by command, but by example. Not by fear, but by trust. And in a world that's hungry for authenticity, that's not just rare, it's magnetic. You will never regret being honest with yourself, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it hurts. Because honesty isn't weakness. It's strength in its rawest form. It's the foundation of every lasting transformation. And once you build your life on that foundation, there's nothing you can't grow through. So if you're ready to become your best self, don't start with a plan, start with the truth. Ask yourself the hard questions, listen to the answers, even when they sting. That's where your power begins. Not in who you pretend to be, but in who you're brave enough to become. We often talk about goals as if they exist in a vacuum, as if sheer willpower and hustle are enough to carry us across the finish line. But if that were true, most people wouldn't fall off track. The truth is, your environment is either your silent partner or your silent opponent. It either works for you or against you. And whether you realize it or not, your environment is speaking to you every single day. The question is, what is it saying? If your environment doesn't match your goals will lose. Every time. Because discipline may win a few battles, but design wins the war. We are not just creatures of habit, we are creatures of context. No one wakes up hoping to be distracted, unfocused, demotivated, or unwell, but look around. How many people surround themselves with noise and clutter and chaos and then wonder why clarity feels out of reach? Take a look at your desk, your bedroom, your kitchen, your phone. Each of these is a microcosm of your values, whether intentionally or by default. Is your phone filled with apps that waste your time or apps that build your skills? Is your kitchen a temple of nourishment or a trap of temptation? Is your bedroom a place of rest or a reflection of restlessness? If you want to be fit, stop putting soda in your fridge. That's not about being strict. It's about being smart. It's about removing the decision altogether so the default becomes the behavior you want to build. If you want to be focused, silence the notifications that break your attention 87 times a day. Because those alerts, they aren't reminders. They're fractures, micro cracks in your concentration that widen over time until your mind becomes a sieve instead of a sponge. And if you want to be inspired, then stop surrounding yourself with people who only know how to complain. Negativity is contagious and proximity is power. Spend too much time with cynics and you'll start calling your dreams unrealistic. We tend to overestimate the power of motivation and underestimate the power of design. Motivation is temporary, it fades, but design, that's a structure. It doesn't rely on mood swings. It doesn't care if you're tired or frustrated. It just works. Set up the system once and it supports you long after the initial fire dies out. A study from Duke University found that more than 40% of what we do each day isn't a decision, it's a habit. An automatic response to the environment around us. That means almost half of our lives is on autopilot. And if your environment is leading your autopilot in the wrong direction, no amount of Sunday night motivation is going to change the outcome. But that's also the good news, because it means change isn't just about being stronger, it's about being smarter. You have to fight yourself every day if you engineer your surroundings to support who you want to become. Want to read more books? Put one on your pillow so it's the last thing you see before sleep. Want to exercise more? Lay out your clothes the night before so there's no barrier between you and the gym. Want to write that novel? Create a writing nook that feels sacred and undistracted. Think about the spaces where you spend the most time. Do they elevate you or exhaust you? Do they reflect who you are or who you used to be? Every item you own, every color on your wall, every sound that greets you when you walk in the door, it all sends a signal to your brain. Design those signals with intention, and you begin to sculpt not just your habits, but your identity. The environment you build is a mirror. It reflects your beliefs, it amplifies your values, it holds up a picture of who you are becoming, or keeps dragging you back into the comfort of who you've been. And comfort, while seductive, is really transformational. There's a reason elite athletes don't train in chaos. There's a reason artists create studios that breathe creativity. There's a reason leaders design quiet spaces to think. They know success isn't just about effort, it's about alignment. When your surroundings are aligned with your intentions, progress stops feeling like a fight and starts feeling like flow. But here's the catch. Creating a supportive environment doesn't happen by accident. It happens by decision. It happens when you take inventory and ask hard questions. Why is this here? What does this item, this app, this person, this habit say about what I value? And if the answer doesn't line up with who you want to be, you don't need permission to let it go. You need courage. Because every time you remove something that drags you backwards, you clear space for something that can pull you forward. And the space you clear, that's not just physical, it's emotional, it's psychological. It's the room your future needs to grow. You don't rise to the level of your ambition, you fall to the level of your environment. So build it like it matters, because it does. Build it like you would a home, not for who you were, but for who you're becoming. Fill it with cues that call you higher. Surround yourself with tools that nudge you toward growth. Design, not just for productivity, but for purpose. Because willpower will always run out. But design can carry you when motivation fails. It can whisper when the world gets loud. It can anchor you in the middle of chaos. You don't have to be superhuman. You just have to be intentional. When you create an environment that reflects your future instead of your past, you stop waking up to a world that works against you. You start waking up in a world that believes in you, that reminds you who you are, that keeps you accountable, not through force, but through alignment. And once that happens, once your surroundings speak the same language as your goals, then growth becomes less of a grind and more of a rhythm, less of a struggle and more of a return to the person you were always capable of becoming. People tend to chase transformation like it's a fireworks display. Loud, dramatic, visible. We imagine becoming our best self means we'll wake up one day motivated beyond reason and overhaul everything all at once. Our habits, our mindset, our lifestyle. We convince ourselves that if we just had the perfect plan, the right opportunity, or a lightning bolt of clarity, we'd finally become that version of ourselves we dream about. But that fantasy does more damage than we realize, because it blinds us to the real process of change. Not the Hollywood version, the human one. True transformation isn't loud. It's quiet. It's built in the unnoticed corners of our lives, in the tiny decisions we make when no one else is watching. It's not the triumphant finish line moment with cheering crowds. It's the decision to show up when it's easier not to. Becoming your best self isn't about grand gestures, it's about identifying the micro wins. That's where greatness lives. A person doesn't become disciplined by willing themselves into a new identity overnight. They become disciplined by choosing over and over again to act in alignment with who they want to be, even when the outcome feels insignificant, even when they're tired or uninspired or alone. A writer doesn't create a masterpiece in a single session. They write 300 words. They do it on the bad days. They do it when the words don't flow. They do it when it's boring. They do it until it becomes who they are. The marathoner didn't start with 26 miles. They started with the decision to put their shoes on when they wanted to sleep in. That moment, that small act was the win, and it was enough. Micro wins aren't just steps towards something greater. They are the foundation of something greater. They build momentum. They create consistency. They reinforce identity. When someone makes a small aligned choice, they're casting a vote not just for a goal, but for the person they're becoming. Every small act matters, because every small act tells a story about who you are. This is why progress so often goes unnoticed, because it's inconveniently humble. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't post itself online. It looks like a young father putting his phone down to look his child in the eyes. It looks like a college student choosing to do one more hour of studying instead of going out. It looks like a recovering addict turning down the drink again. No applause, no spotlight. It's quiet courage. But these moments matter more than we know, because stacked over time, they change everything. When we ignore or dismiss these micro wins, we rob ourselves of the encouragement we need to keep going. We assume that only the big wins are worth celebrating. But what we fail to realize is that the big wins are just micro wins, collected. Each tiny decision creates a ripple, and with enough ripples, you change the tide. This is what so many people miss. They say they want change, but what they really want is visible change, fast change, impressive change, the kind of change you can post or measure or display. But lasting change rarely begins that way. It starts in the dark. It starts where no one claps. And often it starts when you're the only one who even notices. A single mom who wakes up before the world to sit in stillness before her day spirals into demands. She's not just surviving, she's reclaiming space for her soul. That's not small. That's not ordinary. That's a declaration of self-worth. A teenager who turns off Netflix and opens their textbook when no one told them to, that's a step into ownership. That's a quiet rebellion against mediocrity. A man who walks past the bar and straight into a meeting, that's not a small thing. That's a war being won in silence. These micro wins are sacred. They are the proof of growth happening in real time. The danger is we're conditioned to overlook them. We're trained to think that if no one sees it, it doesn't count. But that's backwards. The things that count the most are the things you do when no one's watching, because those are the things that shape your character. And character is what determines your direction. Progress is not linear. Some days you sprint, some days you crawl. But if you can keep spotting the small wins, the I chose better today moments, you'll find that growth is already happening. You're just not giving yourself credit for it. That's why it's so important to celebrate these moments, not with fireworks, but with awareness, with gratitude, with the silent acknowledgement, this mattered. You don't have to wait until you've written the book to call yourself a writer. You don't have to run a race to be an athlete. You don't have to be at the top of your game to be someone worth becoming. You just have to take the step, the next right action. And when you take it, you've already started becoming. If you can recognize the win in simply showing up when it would have been easier not to, you'll begin to build a powerful trust in yourself. And that trust, that's the true engine of transformation. Because the people who keep going aren't the ones with the most talent. They're the ones who've learned to honor the process. They know that every time they follow through on a micro win, they become someone who follows through. And that identity, that self-picture, that is the seed of unstoppable growth. So the next time you make the better choice, the harder choice, pause, recognize it, name it, let it matter. Don't let the simplicity fool you. That decision, however small, is stacking bricks. And over time, you look up and realize you built a fortress, not all at once, but brick by brick, moment by micro win, by micro win by micro. That's how you become your best self, not through perfection, but through presence, through patience, through persistence. The journey may be long, but the power is always in the inch in front of you. And the good news, that inch is always within reach. We talk a lot about being in the zone, about flow, that state where time disappears and everything feels effortless, where inspiration meets execution and you feel almost invincible. We chase that high, build entire routines around capturing it, optimize our lives to stay there longer. And don't get it wrong, it's a beautiful state. It's when work feels like play, when energy pours out of us like it's coming from an endless well. But that's not where transformation happens. That's not where the deepest, most meaningful change takes root. The truth, the inconvenient, unglamorous truth, is that growth lives not in the flow, but in the friction. Because friction is the grind, it's the discomfort, it's the moment when you want to quit, but don't. It's when you're tired, sore, uninspired, and still choose to show up. Think of the gym. No one grows muscles from lifting weights that feel light. You grow when you push against resistance, when it burns, when it aches, when your arms shake and your mind says, that's enough. And something inside you answers, one more rep. That's friction. That's where the growth hides. We live in a world that sells comfort, fast results, instant gratification. But transformation does not come wrapped in convenience. It is not clickable. It is not downloadable. It is earned, and it's earned in the very moments we try to avoid. The hard conversations, the failures, the self-doubt, the missteps, the rejections. These are not detours, these are the path. You don't build resilience when everything goes your way. You build it when nothing does and you rise anyway. Friction is the promotion you didn't get after working twice as hard. It's the criticism of the project you poured your heart into. It's watching someone else win while you wait in silence. These moments don't just hurt, they shape you. They reveal who you are when nobody is clapping. They expose the raw, unfiltered version of you, the one who doesn't perform for praise, but stands rooted in purpose. There's a temptation to run from that discomfort, to rationalize it, numb it, avoid it altogether. But the greatest leaders, creators, and game changers, they lean in. They ask a better question. Not how do I avoid this pain, but what is this pain teaching me? They use the struggle as a mirror. They don't just survive the storm. They let the storm refine them. Because here's the secret. Friction is feedback. It tells you where the edge is. It tells you what still scares you, where you still flinch, what you still haven't mastered. It's not a signal to retreat. It's a signal to dig deeper, to get curious, to stay present when everything in you wants to escape. Think about anyone who's done something extraordinary. Did they do it in flow alone, or did they have to wrestle through failure, insecurity, and resistance? Did they succeed because it was easy, or because they kept showing up when it was not? Flow may make you feel powerful, but friction makes you powerful. Every breakthrough is born out of a breakdown. Every success story has a chapter where everything almost fell apart, but that chapter is usually the most important one because it's where the decision is made. Not the decision to win, that comes later. It's the decision to keep going when nothing's working, when you're tired of believing in yourself, when no one's watching and the only applause is the quiet whisper inside that says, don't stop. That whisper is everything. And it's not born in flow, it's born in friction. We've built a culture that says if it's hard, maybe it's not meant to be. But what if the opposite is true? What if the difficulty is the invitation? What if the very thing you're avoiding holds the lesson, the skill, the strength that would change everything? What if the obstacle is the way? Growth is not avoiding hard things. Growth is doing hard things better, smarter, more intentionally, with less self-pity and more self-awareness. It's learning to sit in the discomfort without needing to escape it. It's trading the need to always feel good for the decision to become someone great. So the next time resistance shows up, don't resist it, welcome it like a sparring partner, because that's what it is. It's not your enemy, it's your coach. It's testing you to see if you're serious, if you're committed, if your dreams are just daydreams, or if they're deep enough to withstand discomfort. When the friction comes, and it will, let it be your signal, not to stop, but to step in. Because every time you move forward in the face of it, you're not just proving something to the world, you're proving something to yourself. You're rewriting the story of who you are. You are not someone who needs things to be easy. You are someone who gets stronger when things are hard. That's the kind of strength that doesn't fade, that doesn't depend on perfect circumstances or perfect timing. That kind of strength is quiet. It doesn't need applause, it just keeps showing up. And that's where the real magic is. Not in the flow, but in the friction. We grow not just by dreaming big, but by choosing who we let stand beside us while we build. Every person you let into your circle becomes part of your story. They influence your beliefs, your behaviors, your boundaries. That's why choosing your people isn't a casual act, it's a deliberate decision. It's the blueprint for becoming your best self. There's a difference between people who make you feel good and people who make you better. One soothes your ego, the other shapes your character. One tells you what you want to hear, the other what you need to hear. One is an echo, the other is a mirror. An echo reinforces what you already believe. It's safe, it's agreeable, it comforts your insecurities, confirms your doubts, excuses your inaction. But mirrors are uncomfortable. They confront you. They don't flatter. They reflect, they don't stroke your ego. They stretch your standards. And that's what you need if you're serious about becoming the kind of person you keep imagining you could be. When we surround ourselves with echoes, we live inside a bubble that protects us from growth. We're coddled in the illusion that we're fine just as we are. But when you're constantly reassured that you're doing great, even when you know you're not giving your best, something inside you starts to erode. Self-respect, drive, hunger. Echoes lull you into mediocrity, but mirrors, they wake you up. Think about the last time someone challenged you, not to criticize, but to call you higher. Maybe it stung in the moment, maybe it felt like a gut punch, but deep down, something in you knew they were right. That's a mirror. That's someone who sees more in you than you're currently choosing to show. That's love with high standards. That's what real community looks like. In ancient warrior tribes, no one became great by training alone. They didn't rehearse their swordplay in solitude. They sparred with each other. And those sparring sessions weren't gentle, they weren't rehearsed, they were raw, real, honest. Not to injure, but to improve. Not to break down, but to build up. But here's the truth. If you only train in isolation, you'll only be as strong as your blind spots allow. But when you invite mirrors into your life, people who challenge you, stretch you, and won't let you settle, you start closing the gap between who you are and who you're capable of becoming. You need those people. You need the friend who tells you you're better than this. The mentor who asks, why are you playing small? The partner who says, I love you enough to not let you lie to yourself. Not because they're perfect, but because they love you enough to speak truth even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. And you can't just be the receiver of that kind of love. You have to be the giver too. You have to be the mirror for someone else, because growth isn't a one-way street, it's a circle. When you challenge others with honesty and compassion, you reinforce those same standards within yourself. You start to live the values you hold others to. You sharpen by sharpening iron, sharpens iron. But this kind of relationship doesn't happen by accident. You have to build it intentionally. You have to invite it in. And that takes courage. It takes humility. It takes letting go of your pride long enough to say, I want you to tell me the truth even when it hurts. I trust you to hold me to my own standard. Because without that, you're not growing, you're coasting. And coasting never leads to greatness. So look around. Who's in your corner? Who challenges you? Who loves you enough to call you out when you shrink, make excuses, or forget your worth? Who holds you accountable to the standard you've set, not the world's standard, your standard? And who are you that person for? This isn't about criticism. It's not about judgment. It's about care. The kind of care that refuses to let potential go to waste. The kind of care that chooses discomfort over dishonesty. The kind of care that's willing to risk a hard conversation because your growth matters more than momentary comfort. We've glamorized comfort. We've romanticized ease. But comfort zones are quiet killers. They keep you stuck. They keep you soft. They keep you from discovering what you're really made of. Mirrors push you out of that zone. They stretch you into the unknown. They ask more of you than you want to give, but they also show you that you have more in you than you believed. And it's in that stretch, in that friction between who you are and who you want to be, that growth lives. Your best self is not born in silence. It is summoned in struggle. It is called out by those who believe in you, challenge you, and don't let you hide. It is forged in the fires of feedback, accountability, and love that tells the truth. So stop looking for comfort. Start looking for clarity. Stop chasing applause. Start chasing alignment. Surround yourself with people who reflect the honest, sometimes messy, always powerful truth of who you are and who you can be. Mirrors don't just show you the dirt, they show you the possibility beneath it. And that reflection, that's where transformation begins. Most people go through life chasing goals, career promotions, financial milestones, a certain kind of lifestyle, believing that the finish line will bring them the fulfillment they're starving for, and yet when they arrive, they're often confused. Something still feels missing. The win tastes flat, the applause fades quickly. Because achievement without meaning is just motion. Success without significance is just noise. And without purpose, even the best version of your life can feel like someone else's story. Purpose isn't reserved for the few who write books or build empires. It isn't owned by leaders, CEOs, or visionaries. Purpose lives in every one of us, but it doesn't shout, it whispers. It doesn't march in, it emerges, usually in our darkest moments, when everything else has crumbled and the only thing left standing is the question, why does this even matter? And that's where we begin. Purpose isn't found in grand declarations or lofty visions. It shows up in the ordinary moments that ask us to keep going when giving up seems easier. It shows up when you're exhausted and discouraged, and something deep inside still says, try again. That voice, that's not habit. That's not ego. That's purpose. I remember meeting a man who had lost everything in a business collapse. Overnight, he went from thriving to barely surviving. And yet, every morning, he got up, shaved, dressed in a suit, and walked to a local cafe to apply for jobs, to brainstorm, to reconnect with former clients. When asked why he kept doing it, he said, because my son is watching, and I want him to learn that we don't only show up when it's easy, we show up because it matters. That's purpose. It's the invisible thread that ties your daily actions to something bigger than yourself. It's what transforms grind into growth, failure into fuel, and struggle into story. Purpose doesn't remove the pain. It redeems it. It gives it context. It gives it direction. There's a difference between movement and meaning. We're all busy. We all have goals. But the difference between burnout and boundless energy isn't rest, it's reason. When we know why we're doing what we're doing, we can go further, endure longer, and sacrifice more without resentment. Think about the people you admire most, not for their fame or fortune, but for their impact, for their consistency, for the way they carry themselves. What sets them apart isn't that they have it all figured out, it's that they're anchored. Their decisions are filtered through a deeper clarity. Their motivation doesn't fluctuate with the weather or the bank account or the praise of others. They are rooted, and that root is purpose. Purpose doesn't eliminate fear, but it gives you a reason to walk through it. It doesn't erase failure, but it gives you a reason to rise again. It's the compass you cling to when the map gets torn. And the truth is, you don't need a perfect strategy. You don't need a 5-year plan printed on a vision board. You need a reason, because when your why is real, you'll surprise yourself with what you're capable of enduring, of creating, of becoming. I once met a woman who had lost her child in a tragic accident. For a long time, she didn't want to get out of bed, understandably. Life didn't make sense. But over time, she started writing letters to her child, letters to herself, letters to other parents going through grief. One of those letters ended up in the hands of a father in another city who had just experienced the same kind of loss. That father wrote back and said her words were the only thing that gave him the courage to keep breathing. That woman now runs a nonprofit offering support to grieving families. She told me I couldn't change what happened, but I could choose what I did with it. That's purpose. That's what it does. It doesn't promise comfort. It promises clarity. And with clarity, even chaos starts to make sense. So many people look for their purpose like it's hiding somewhere on a mountaintop, waiting to be discovered. But purpose isn't found in the distance. It's revealed in action. It's uncovered in service. It's discovered in paying attention to what breaks your heart and what lights it up. It's shaped by your pain and your passion equally. We're told to follow our dreams, but maybe we need to follow our meaning. Dreams fade, purpose endures. And purpose doesn't always look like changing the world. Sometimes it looks like changing your world, your family, your community, the people who sit across the table from you. Sometimes it looks like choosing kindness when you're tempted by bitterness. Sometimes it looks like listening when silence would be easier. Sometimes it looks like being the mirror that shows others their strength when they forget. And when you anchor your life in purpose, something beautiful happens. You become magnetic. People want to follow someone who knows where they're headed, not because the destination is certain, but because the reason is solid. You don't just inspire others, you awaken them. You remind them of their own why. You create a ripple that outlasts your presence. It's easy to live on an autopilot. It's easy to scroll through life checking boxes and chasing metrics, but it's costly because eventually, even if you win the race,